Friday after Thanksgiving edition of our program. Neighbor, we took Thursday, Friday, and Saturday off, courtesy of the good folks at the Texas Farm Bureau Radio Network. Now allow us to continue to do that with this edition of Texas Farm Bureau Roundup.
This is Farm Bureau Roundup, featuring farm and ranch news from the Panhandle to the Rio Grande Valley and from West to East Texas. Here's your host, Tom Nicoletti.
Hello and welcome to Farm Bureau Roundup. Happy Thanksgiving. Now that winter wheat planting is almost completed, farmers have more decisions to make for their crop. There are various priorities for the multiple titles in the 2023 Farm Bill. Plus, fall gardening is now in the maintenance stage.
The wheat planting may not be completely finished, but great progress has been made. Now the difficult part starts. Hello, I'm Barry Muller, and I'll explain in my report from North Central Texas.
The Amarillo Farm and Ranch Show is coming up next week, and it's a big event that goes way beyond just getting to look at a lot of equipment. I'm James Hunt, and I'll bring you a preview of some special educational opportunities for producers that are part of the show.
It's autumn in Texas, and that can mean everything from a bright sunny day to a freeze. So please join me, John Begnaud, as we talk about gardening in Texas during the autumn.
Often there are non-traditional products that claim to improve forage production at a lower cost than traditional fertilizers. We will discuss a few things we should keep in mind when evaluating these products. I'm Dr. Vanessa Olson from Overton.
Texas Rolling Plains farmers have just about wrapped up their winter wheat planting. Now, as Barry Muller reports from Wichita Falls, producers need to make more management decisions as their crop establishes in their fields.
With the summer and fall we experienced here in Texas, I never expected the wheat planting to move along as well here on the Rolling Plains as it has. There's always sort of an unwritten goal to have the crop in the ground by Thanksgiving. We managed to get close this year. The hot, dry weather prevented many farmers from having their ground ready for planting, whether they're full-till or no-till operators. But as I said in my report a few weeks ago, these modern air seeders help get over the ground quickly when the weather permits, and that's been the case this season. Even the small amount of wheat that was planted early has survived and grown off quite well with the fall rains reviving it. Now it's decision time. The wheat market is staying in the $8 per bushel range right now, even though the raw supply and demand numbers wouldn't seem to support that price level. I say it's decision time, as farmers will have to make some input decisions soon, the main one being how much fertilizer to put out. When fertilizer was $200 or $300 per ton, the decision was easy. You applied it prior to planting to raise a good crop. But now with fertilizer at $800 to $1,000 per ton, a lot of folks won't make that input call until the seed is in the ground and up and growing. The window is fairly small for application, as the nutrients need to be applied and reined in and ready for the wheat to break dormancy in early March. Now back to the market. Now $8 is a good market, but without quoting all the numbers in the supply and demand report, let's just say world wheat stocks are up. So how long will $8 range hold its support to help with these input costs? Well, it's disruption in transportation of the product that's supporting wheat right now. First COVID, and now the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Now, if the Ukraine situation is rectified, the market could fall quickly as the shipments begin to pick up again. There are some $8 to $8.50 contracts out there, depending on location. So that helps the farmer. They can always hedge the product on the Board of Trade. So there's a couple of things they can do. The problem with that is when you do those things, several things can happen, and more than half of them are bad. So with the crop in the ground, the hard part, rather than being over, may just be beginning for lots of producers. And here many of you thought all the farmer had to do was get the crop planted and sit in the coffee shop until harvest. Hey, stay tuned, folks. We'll keep you posted as to how this all works out. Reporting from the Rolling Plains, I'm Barry Muller for Farm Bureau Roundup.
Many more decisions will be made about agriculture's future in 2023 with the writing of a new farm bill. Gary Joyner has more on the priorities for the legislation.
The most significant piece of legislation that impacts farmers and ranchers is on the calendar next year, the 2023 Farm Bill. The right package is needed to reduce food insecurity, bolster national security, and encourage long-term stability for farm and ranch families. The American Farm Bureau Federation released its priorities for the bill. It's among the first national organizations to do so. There are 4 priorities: continuing current Farm Bill program funding, maintaining a unified Farm Bill that includes nutrition programs and farm programs together, prioritizing risk management tools that include federal crop insurance and commodity programs, and ensuring adequate USDA staffing and resources to provide technical assistance. The priorities include more than 60 recommendations over multiple titles of the Farm Bill. The recommendations include reference price increases for commodities, more transparency for milk checks, funding for conservation programs, rural development, and streamlining of nutrition programs to get food to those who need it most. The current 2018 Farm Bill has worked well, but tweaks are needed. The 2018 package expires in September. A lot of work lies ahead for the agriculture committees in the new Congress. They must cobble together a new farm bill that earns enough support in the House and Senate to cross the finish line. It will likely be a sprint to get there. For Farm Bureau Roundup, I'm Gary Joyner in Waco.
It is that time of year when thousands of people gather at the annual Amarillo Farm and Ranch Show. James Hunt tells us a lot of learning opportunities will be available for producers at next week's event.
The annual Farm and Ranch Show is coming up November 29th through December 1st at the Amarillo Civic Center, with almost 500 exhibitors on hand with things to show off. And beyond all the equipment and technology to look at, there are a lot of educational opportunities available for ag producers. Danny Nusser is the regional program leader for Texas A&M AgriLife, and he says the annual CEU workshop offered on the first day of the show has on tap a lineup that includes AgriLife irrigation expert Dana Porter providing a presentation on chemigation, a subject Nusser says is very topical right now.
For a lot of different reasons, the equipment, the difference that we've got now in some of our irrigation systems. You know, we got so many guys out here doing no-till and not wanting to get over that crop with different equipment. So some of the advantages of using chemigation in those areas. And then I think Dana really get into some of the equipment differences and some of the efficiencies of their systems.
Nusser says there will also be a presentation by AgriLife Integrated Pest Management Agent Blaine Reed on drift minimization, as keeping control of pesticides is very important in our agriculturally diverse region.
You know, we're growing cotton with sorghum, with every other type of crops that are out there. So our producers do a really good job of watching the wind speed and humidity and some of the things that they have to do to just to keep from problems. But sometimes we run into issues. And so he's just going to go over those key things, nozzling, and just trying to avoid some issues that a guy might get into.
Other subjects for the November 29th session include wheat fertilization, weed management, and State Agriculture Department laws and regulations. And to top it all off, there will be 5 CEUs available for producers who attend the event. Now that's what's coming up on Tuesday. On Wednesday, November 30th, it's the annual Texas Wheat Symposium, an event that will offer the audience information on government policy issues, USDA programs, and a market outlook. The keynote speaker for Wednesday's symposium is Evan Smith of the Texas Tribune, who will talk about meeting the needs of rural Texas. There are plenty of other educational programs being offered at next week's Amarillo Farm and Ranch Show, so for more information, go online and use the search words Amarillo Farm and Ranch Show 2022. For Farm Bureau Roundup in Amarillo, I'm James Hunt.
This is also the time of year for maintenance in yards, landscapes, and gardens. Horticulturist John Begnaud explains some of those chores going into the winter months.
Well, here it is, autumn in Texas, and we've had parts of Texas that have already had their first freeze, and of course some that haven't yet, but it has gotten considerably cooler, which after a summer like we had is really a blessing. So when we look at planting right now, we're not doing a lot of planting in most areas. You know, you might plant some garlic in the garden or a few things like that, but we're wrapping up our fall planting season as far as trees go and turf goes and things like that. So what we're looking at is kind of a maintenance deal. And one thing you want to do is address those falling leaves. You want to avoid scalping turf grass at this time of year, especially summer grasses. And you don't want to leave those leaves that have fallen on there if they're really thick and deep, and will prevent the movement of rain or irrigation to getting to the root system. And what you do with them is your choice. You like to keep them on the property if you can. You reuse them and recycle them. You want to avoid trying to throw them into the landfill if you can. If your area has a composting process or an opportunity, then you want to take advantage of that. You want to consider storing products such as chemicals for treating insects and weeds in a place that will not freeze. That's very, very important. You like to put all your stuff up sharp and ready to go in the spring. And if you have those gas engines, you want to put stabilizer in there so that you won't have that issue of gumming up those carburetors next spring. And one thing we're beginning right now is pruning trees. Those of you especially that are in oak wilt areas of Texas, it's prime time because it's gotten cool enough that the beetles that spread this disease won't be active. So you have from now all the way in through February. And so if you have to do a big major job, you want to start taking bids from some of your really good arborists in the area and see what they would charge you and how they would handle that situation. And that freeze damage we had 2 years ago, it's probably time to go ahead and clean all of those trees up during this pruning season. This is John Begnaud for Texas Farm Bureau Roundup from San Angelo.
We close this week's program with Dr. Vanessa Olson and the subject of non-traditional products on the market for use as soil additives.
Soil additives are different from traditional fertilizers and soil amendments in that they usually have little or no nutrient content. There is no requirement for these non-traditional products to have a guaranteed analysis label. Many of these products state on the label that they are not a substitute for a fertilizer program, but enhance the effectiveness of fertilizer normally applied. They are claimed to improve soil physical, chemical, and biological properties to improve nutrient and or water availability in the soil and increase crop nutrient uptake. Most traditional soil amendments and commercial fertilizers have been tested extensively through research trials to document both their benefits and limitations. The benefits for many of these non-traditional products have not been proven scientifically by independent research. Many marketers of these products will rely on testimonials with limited or no actual data toward performance. Another common theme is low cost and low application rates. Therefore, be very cautious before deciding to use these products. The best advice that can be given to growers is to evaluate new products carefully and insist upon local or regional research data. Anytime we are making decisions about products or nutrients to add for forage production, we should always start with a soil test. Soil tests can be used to estimate the kinds and amounts of soil nutrients already available to plants. They also can be used as aids in determining fertilizer needs. Properly conducted soil sampling and testing can be cost-effective indicators of the types and amounts of fertilizer needed to improve forage yield. Levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium applied should be based on soil test recommendations as well as match farm goals. This is Dr. Vanessa Olson with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension in Overton for the Texas Farm Bureau Roundup.
Neighbor, before Tom Nicoletti takes us out, let's check grains. Corn through the Panhandle, $7.83 1/4 to $8.13 1/4, down 6 1/2. Milo, $6.93 1/4 to $7.33 1/4, up 6 1/2. And hard red winter wheat, $8.70 1/4 to $9.20 1/4, up 7 3/4. West Texas cotton, 191 bales, $80.40 to $80.65. East Texas, 1,543 bales, $80.65 to $82.15. The 1,734 bales across the state averaged $81.90. Now back to Tom Nicoletti and the balance of Texas Farm Bureau Roundup.
That is our program for this week. Be with us again next week for agricultural news from around the state. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a safe and happy Thanksgiving weekend. For everyone at Farm Bureau Roundup, I'm Tom Nicoletti, and this is the Texas Farm Bureau Radio Network.